When we think of 1947 in India, our minds immediately go to the unimaginable tragedy of partition, and for good reason. But that's only half of what was happening. At the very same time, a political miracle was taking place, an incredible feat of statecraft that stitched together a single nation from hundreds of separate pieces. This is that story, a tale of two completely different fates unfolding at the exact same moment.
So let's start with this man, Sir Cyril Radcliffe. He was a British lawyer, and get this, he had never, ever been to India. He knew nothing about its culture, its geography, couldn't tell you the difference between Punjab and Bengal. So why on earth was he chosen for this monumental task of dividing a subcontinent? Well, it was precisely because he knew nothing. He was seen as impartial. But that so-called neutrality, well, it would come at a terrifying price.
So how did one person with a pencil cause so much chaos? Well, to understand that, we first have to look at the line itself. This was a border drawn in an insane hurry, with terrible information, and it would change millions of lives forever.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's completely mad. Radcliffe gets to India on July 8th, and he has just over a month to draw a border across a subcontinent. So why the insane rush? The Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, famously said he felt like he was sitting atop of a volcano. He just wanted to divide the country and get out as fast as possible. And that frantic pace meant there was no time for real surveys, no time to actually visit these places. It was all just drawing lines on a map.
Now, the idea on paper seemed simple enough. If a district had a Muslim majority, it went to Pakistan. If it had a Hindu and Sikh majority, it went to India. The problem? The tools he was given for this job were, frankly, terrible. He was working with old, inaccurate maps and census data that you just couldn't trust. It was a complete recipe for disaster.
And this really shows you the kind of impossible choices he was facing. Take Calcutta. It had a clear Hindu majority, so it went to India. Okay, straightforward enough. But then you have Lahore. Oh boy. Lahore was this vibrant cultural and economic center for Hindus and Sikhs, but it had a slight Muslim majority. In the end, Radcliffe's logic was that the new country of Pakistan couldn't start without a major city. But man, that decision made absolutely no one happy.
Okay, so the line's drawn on the map, but now we have to turn away from the cold, hard logic of politics and look at what this meant for real people on the ground. Because the true cost of partition wasn't about land, it was about human lives.
20 million. Just let that number sink in. 2 crore people were forced from their homes. This became the largest mass migration in all of human history. Imagine, your family's lived in a village for centuries, and then overnight, someone tells you you're now living in the wrong country. People just picked up what they could carry and started walking. In caravans, it sometimes stretched for 50 miles.
The sheer horror of it all is captured in these things called ghost trains. A train would pull into a station, but it would be dead silent. And when people opened the doors, it would just be filled with the bodies of refugees who'd been massacred on their journey. This chilling message was actually found scrawled on the side of one of those trains arriving from Pakistan, a gruesome, heartbreaking symbol of the hate that had been unleashed.
And it wasn't just land and people. They tried to divide everything, which really makes you wonder, how do you even do that? How do you split every single asset a country owns down to the last paperclip? Well, as you can imagine, the whole process turned into absolute bureaucratic madness.
I'm not exaggerating. They divided every file, every chair, every table. They argued over library books, typewriters, even soap cases. But probably the most bizarre story is about 60 English ducks. Seriously, the Bengal government had just imported them. A huge debate started over who owned the ducks. While they argued, the payment was stopped, and the poor ducks were just left in a warehouse. If that doesn't perfectly symbolize the absurdity of it all, I don't know what does.
But you know, even in all of this darkness, there was this incredible story of hope. Let's go to Calcutta, where one man, with nothing but his own conviction, managed to stop a city that everyone expected to burn to the ground. You see, Mountbatten was absolutely terrified about Calcutta. He had sent all 55,000 of his soldiers to Punjab, which left Bengal completely exposed. He knew that if riots broke out in Calcutta's crowded neighborhoods, no army in the world could stop it. So, in a moment of sheer desperation, he made a pretty wild request to Mahatma Gandhi. Would you please be my one-man boundary force?
Gandhi said yes, but on his own, totally radical terms. He decided to go live in a broken-down house in a Muslim area, with H.S. Suhrawardy, the very politician that Hindus blamed for horrible massacres that had happened before. He made Suhrawardy promise to protect Hindus in another region and to live there with him with zero security. And then, when some violence did flare up,
Gandhi played his final card. He began a fast to the death. And the result was just astonishing. As word got out that Gandhi was dying, the conscience of the city just seemed to wake up. The actual gang leaders who'd been rioting came to his bedside, confessed what they'd done, and literally piled their weapons at his feet. In just 73 hours, peace returned to Calcutta, and incredibly, for the rest of his life, there was never another major riot there. It was a true miracle. Okay, so while this incredible life and death drama is happening, there's a second, quieter crisis going on, and that was the challenge of the 565 princely states. If they weren't brought into the new India, the map of the country would have looked, as one person said, like a slice of Swiss cheese.
Yeah, just look at this. A huge chunk of the subcontinent wasn't actually British India. It was a patchwork of 565 different kingdoms. The deal they had with the British was called paramountcy, which basically meant the British handled defense and foreign policy and the local rulers ran their own states. But with the British leaving, that deal was off the table. Every single one of those 565 rulers was now technically free to become an independent country. You can just imagine the chaos.
So, solving this giant puzzle fell to this amazing team of three people. You had Sardar Patel, the political strongman, you had VP Menon, the genius bureaucrat who did all the groundwork, and you had Lord Mountbatten, who used his royal status to charm and pressure the princes into signing on.
Patel had this fantastic analogy he used with Mountbatten. He said, "You bring me a basket full of apples, and I will be happy to accept it." The apples, of course, were the 565 princely states. And the goal was simple. Get every single one into India's basket before the August 15th deadline. It was a frantic race against time.
So how'd they do it? How did they actually fill that basket with all 565 apples? Well, the story of how they did it is like a political thriller, full of secret deals, high-stakes diplomacy, and just unbelievable drama. Let's get into it. Let me tell you one of the wildest stories. It's about the state of Jodhpur. The young Maharaja there was actually thinking of joining Pakistan. Jinnah even gave him a blank piece of paper and said, "Write down your terms." But VP Menon found out, and he and Mountbatten cornered the prince. They basically forced him to sign the papers to join India. But then, in a rage, the prince pulled out a tiny pistol and held it to Menon's head. Mountbatten had to step in. That's how intense this all was.
So, by the deadline, nearly all the apples were in the basket. But there were two massive problems left. And as you can see here, they were perfect mirror images of each other. In Junagadh, you had a Muslim ruler over a mostly Hindu population, and he wanted to join Pakistan. And in Kashmir, you had a Hindu ruler over a mostly Muslim population, and he wanted to be independent. Two giant headaches.
The Kashmir crisis finally exploded in October 47. Tribesmen backed by Pakistan invaded, and the Maharaja's army just fell apart. So in a total panic, he signed the papers to join India. India immediately began airlifting troops to Srinagar, but it was an incredibly close call. Here's the crazy twist of fate. The Indian army only made it in time because the invaders stopped to loot and plunder the town of Baramulla. That single delay gave India the tiny window it needed to secure the airport. It was a moment that changed history.
So when you look at the map of India today, it's so important to remember that it was never guaranteed to look that way. It was forged in the fire of 1947. Without the tireless and sometimes ruthless work of Patel and Menon, that map could have been a chaotic mess. And that really is the tale of two fates. The partition was an absolute tragedy, but the integration of the states, that was a political miracle, achieved against all possible odds.
And that leaves us with one last question to think about. We live with the tragic consequences of partition every single day, but it's worth taking a moment to imagine the alternative. What if the miracle had failed? What would the subcontinent look like today?